The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Open to me, my sister, my kin, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is moist with dew, my locks with the drop of night. The bride. I have shed my robe. How shall I don it again? I have bathed my feet. How shall I soil them again? My beloved thrust his hand through the latch hole, and at his touch, my heart thrilled within me. So before we jump into the cantata's interpretation of these verses, I just want to put out there what the basics of what Gilbert of Hoyland and some of the other early church fathers, how they interpreted this in the way of, I sleep, but my heart is awake. Their interpretation of that, I think we touched on this last week, is that the bride is alert and ready and waiting. Even when she's sleeping, her heart is awake, listening for the knocking, for the calling of the bridegroom. And this is that being alert and awake and ready for him to draw us into contemplation. And so the way that he looks at these lines is that when she has taken off her cloak and washed her feet, that she's taken off the cloak of the world. She's shed all of her worldly attachments, all of her worldly distractions, all of her anxieties and worries, that she stands in a sense naked, open, and vulnerable before the bridegroom, ready and waiting for him. And the same with her having washed her feet or bathed her feet, that she has been to the sacrament of confession. She's done her act of contrition. She has purified herself, purified her heart, and she's ready. Whereas in the cantata, we'll hear that these words have also been interpreted to be that she hesitates, that she does not open, that she makes excuses. Okay, so Gilbert of Hoyland's is very much opposite in that he sees these as her being ready for the coming of the bridegroom. And then when it says that my beloved thrust his hand through the latch hole, and at his touch, my heart thrilled within me. And I know sometimes this part of the song can be very difficult for people. And so I love this interpretation that this touch, his touching the latch hole, is that little breath of the Holy Spirit. It is the inspirations of the Holy Spirit that can breathe through even just a tiny crack, a tiny keyhole in our heart. And that we learn to recognize the touch of the Holy Spirit, the very gentle whisperings. And this is what he means when he says that he thrust his hand through the latch hole, that it's that breath of the Holy Spirit entering our hearts, being touched by grace. And this inflowing of grace, this inspiration of the Holy Spirit, inflames her desire and her love. And so her heart thrills within her. Some other versions say, my soul was melted. And is that not true for all of us when we have those moments where we hear the voice of the bridegroom deep within us, or we sense the touch of the Holy Spirit and inspiration, that our heart is thrilled within us? His conversation is sweetness itself. And our love is inflamed. Our desire is increased at every little touch, every little whisper. What's seen as her hesitation in the cantata, in one interpretation, this is seen as a fault of hers to hesitate, whereas Gilbert of Hoyland and others see this as a moment of discernment, that she's hesitating because she needs to be sure that it's the bridegroom. And he gives us this advice for that discernment. He says, the voice of my beloved as he knocks. The enemy acts timidly at his first approach, like a spy who fears discovery. He taps, he does not knock. Your beloved, wishing to be recognized, knocks loudly. Open to me, he says, because his head is moist with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night, as if to say, open to me, because I slip in filled with the dew of grace. Open to me, make yourself ready for so great a presence. And he comes to us with his head dripping with dew, dripping with grace. He asks us to open and to let him in so that he can fill us with his dewdrops of grace, of healing, wisdom and understanding, all his gifts. And dew is very symbolic in the scriptures. I have a list of scriptures that talk about the symbolism of the dew, so I'm not going to get into all of them. But Aponius, one of the early church fathers who wrote extensively about the song, he has this little paragraph that I wanted to share. Regarding this dew, the prophet Isaiah cries out, "The dew that comes from you is healing for them." And in Hebrew manuscripts, your dew is a dew of light. Plainly, he taught in these words that the dew of which he spoke is constituted as the light of wisdom and as healing for souls. That is to say, the teaching of wisdom and truth, apart from which the soul is weak and blind. The dew also represents the fertility of God and his blessing. So it brought to mind, I went back and read the scriptures from Exodus 16:13 about the manna falling. And they saw dew. It fell as dew on the grass. And it wasn't until as the dew evaporated that then the manna was there. And I thought about how his desire is to feed and to nourish us, right? And it's his desire then, this is where the imagery of spousal love, that nuptial imagery, that when we open and receive him, his head covered in dew, not only then does he refresh us and feed us and nourish us, but then that his fertility is within us, that then gives us the strength and the ability to go out and share his love. Love begetting love. But it always begins first with that bridal posture in prayer of openness and receptivity. I also always think about the second Eucharistic prayer, when the priest prays over the bread and wine and says, by sending down your spirit like the dewfall. And so a very prayerful meditation can be to imagine the bridegroom, the thirsty beggar, knocking at the heart of your door, the door of your heart, with drops of dew just falling, just covering his face, and inviting you to come and open the door and allow him in, so that you might kiss the dewdrops from him and be refreshed, be healed, be restored.